In this video, we are going to be talking about adding and subtracting decimals. Now, adding and subtracting decimals is fairly similar to adding and subtracting regular numbers. The only thing we need to focus on is there is one little step that we have to do different. So I have my steps over here so that we can reference them as we go. I have the first thing we're going to do is write our equation vertically, making sure to line up the decimals. So that means our decimals need to go straight up and down. Then we will add or subtract normally. Now, sometimes we'll need to use a zero placeholder, or we'll need to borrow if we're doing subtraction. So just keep that in mind as we go forward. And when we get down to the answer, our decimal is going to drop straight down through the equation into the answer. So I have some questions we're going to go over together, and then I have sent out some practice ones that you guys can work on your own. So the first question that we are going to do together is 5.67 plus 6.15. Now, I've purposely written this initially in your notes as a horizontal equation because I want to have you guys set them up vertically. Now, that is step number 1. Write vertically, meaning up and down, making sure to line up the decimals. So that means that I need to make sure that those decimals go straight up and down. So I'm going to have 5.67 and 6.15. I'm adding, so I'm going to get something that looks like this. Now, to double check that our decimals are lined up, something that I sometimes do is I will do a little bit of a circle here to make sure that they're in the same spot and that they are directly above one another. Once I have that, I can take and add like I normally would. So 7 plus 5 is going to give me 12. I'm going to write the 2 underneath, and because I'm more than 10, I'm going to carry the 1 into that next column. Then I'm going to add all 3 of those numbers. So 1 plus 6 is going to give me 7, plus 1 is 8. I'm not going to worry about the fact that that's where my decimal is right now. I'm going to deal with that at the very end. So I'm going to go 5 plus 6 is 11. I could carry it over, but because we're in the last column here, I'm just going to write it as 11. So this is step number 2, adding or subtracting normally. So my last step is step 3. The decimal drops straight down into the answer. So when I look at this, I'm going to drop that straight down. And if it helps you to draw an arrow, draw an arrow. It's a really good tool that you can use to keep that organized. And it's going to drop right into here. So I know that 5.67 plus 6.15 is equal to 11.82. Now, that one we had the same number of decimals in both of those. So question number 2 that we're going to work on, I should maybe use one of these, is going to have different numbers. So I have 7.165 plus 4.12. So I'm going to start back at step number 1. Write it vertically, making sure to line up the decimals. So 7.167. Now, this is where it gets kind of tricky. My 4 is still going to go here, and my decimal, I have that check. They're lined up. 1, 2. Now, I do that quick check. Yep, I lined those up really nice, but it doesn't look super awesome because when I add, this kind of is empty. So this is where we talk about a zero placeholder. So I'm going to add a 0 in here to help me as I go through my adding, just because it helps us keep a little bit more organized. So I'm going to start on the right-hand side. 7 plus 0 equals 7. 6 plus 2 is 8. 1 plus 1 is 2. Jump over this for now. 7 plus 4 is 11. And last thing that we're going to do, step 3, the decimal drops straight down into that answer. So both those examples deal with adding. We're going to do a couple of subtracting examples as well. So example number 3 is 6.15 minus 4.24. So I'm going to go back up to that step number 1, write it vertically, making sure that my decimals line up. So 6.15 minus 4.24. I'm going to do my quick check. My decimals line up really nicely there. I can continue onward. Now, because this is a subtraction question, remember we have to change the question that we're asking ourselves every time. So 5 minus 4 gives me 1. Now, 1 minus 2. We have explored integers and we know that that is possible, but it doesn't work in this situation. So this is where we are going to have to do some borrowing out of our steps. So I cannot subtract 2 from 1, so I'm going to borrow 10 out of that 6, so that's going to become 5. And sometimes we'll write a little one. I like to write it as a full 11 at the top because I find it keeps me a little bit more organized. So 11 minus 2 is going to give me 9, and 5 minus 4 is 1. Now that last step, bring that decimal straight down. So that is a situation where we had to do some borrowing in order to answer. In this one, we are going to have something else that comes up as well. So 7.68 minus 3.491. So back up to step number 1. The nice thing about having steps like this is that I can reference them for every single question that I do. And they're really handy to have sitting there ready for me so that I don't have to think so hard. I just have to look back and go, okay, right, that is what I do next. So I'm going to write my equation. Now, this one, you'll notice I have 2 decimals and 3 decimal places. So I'm going to have to use one of those 0 placeholders again. And so I need to make sure that when I do this, that my decimal lines up. That's the important part. So my decimals have lined up. But when I go to do my equation here, I can't have a blank minus 1. So I'm going to use a 0 placeholder in there to help me, because I could do 0 minus 1, or I could borrow to do some 0 minus 1, but I need something there to start with. So once we have our decimals lined up, we have our 0 placeholder, I can start my subtraction. So 0 minus 1, I can't do that, so I'm going to borrow from my 8, and I'm going to have 10. So 10 minus 1 is 9. 7 minus 9. Well, I can't do that one either, so I'm going to have to borrow again. So the 6 is going to become a 5, and my 7 is going to become 17. So 17 minus 9 is going to give me 8. 5 minus 4 is 1. 7 minus 3 is 4. I've done all my subtraction. I'm going to bring that decimal down, and that is going to be my answer, 4.189. Now, I really encourage you to only use your calculator here to check your answers. So you can do these and they should come up with the same answer, but keep this in handy. So you'll notice that I did have the same sheet that you do. But what I actually did is I ripped out the steps so that I could keep them handy. Now, you could choose to rewrite them somewhere. You could do the same as me, or maybe just have this whole sheet handy as you're going through. But having these steps is really helpful as we move through each of the steps, so that I don't have to keep looking back or thinking, okay, what do I do next? It tells me and I don't have to focus on that. So practice the questions and let me know how it goes.